Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
So, housekeeping, if you have not been to one of these before, you can speak up. You just have to unmute yourself. I think I set it so that you're muted automatically when you join, but you can unmute yourself if you are brave enough to do so. This one is about pdfToolbox and JavaScript stuff. I'm sorry, I was distracted. I was just trying to make sure that there is actually recording going on. And I don't know. Pause, share. Yes, it is recording. Good. So we've had two cafes about variables already. And the first one talking about simple variables and the second one talking about JavaScript variables. And I gave some examples of those things. There is one, or there was one topic that we haven't talked about because I wanted to also give a little bit of an example. And the topic has to do with how to combine Preflight and then JavaScript in order to interpret things a little bit better than what you can do with just Preflight by itself or just JavaScript by itself. In other words, how can you run Preflight and then use the results of that Preflight afterwards? And I had even come up with a little challenge.
Yes.
For which I have received two answers that both more or less work. And we'll discuss that as well. But I want to show you the theory first of all. And it is not that complicated. Well, I don't think it is that complicated because I know how it works. So that's always easy. I've come up with a little example here, and the example is, so I made my own version of this challenge. It's called Remove Empty Pages from End of Document. And I'll use this to explain the principle. And then once we're through with that and I've answered questions, I have another library where I have the two results in as well, and we can take a look at those. But let's talk about the theory before. And what I have here is a process plan. Now, the script part you will see in this is maybe a little bit bigger than what it should be. And that is mostly because it is part of a larger process plan that did a little bit more. And I will show you that at the end as well. But I simplified it a little bit for the challenge here. What you see is a sequence that is a pre-flight check, and then there is a little script, and then there is a fix-up. Yeah? And you could use the same structure in many different ways. So you can actually use this the same theory for a number of different things. And what happens here is the pre-flight check not only does a check and give you either a hit or no hit, it also stores information in the JavaScript area that we're interested in. Yeah? And specifically, when I look at the script, so like I said, my script is perhaps a little bit more convoluted than it should be. But when you look at the script, what is the important part is that I am looking at this app doc result area. And you can also find that area if you go to insert JavaScript objects. And if I would search for result in there, you can see that there is a long list of things that it allows you to enter there as well. But it all boils down to the same thing. Yeah? It all boils down to the same thing. Every time you do pre-flight, and that means you run a fix-up or a check or a profile or a process plan, the results of that are stored under app.doc results. So if I run a profile, the name of the profile will be here, the results will be saved here, the links to the result files will be saved in there. I will have variables that specify how many errors, informations, and warnings there were. And this is of course the most interesting bit, I will also have a list of the checks that were run with the results of those checks. So if I have a single check that I run, there always will only be one result. I run one check, I get one result. So if I look at the check that is run here, my check is page is empty. Now this is not an ideal check, but it is good enough for what I want to show. I'll tell you later where the problem is a little bit. But when I run this check, I will get an answer on the question, is the page empty or not? So if I do tests, you can see that it gives me 2 hits for this particular check because the document I have here has 2 empty pages. There's number 1 and there is number 2. They both, and well, they're both in the middle of the document, but I have 2 empty pages, so I get 2 hits for that particular check. If I take my other test document, I get 5 hits. The 2 hits in the middle of the document, but this one also has 3 empty pages at the end of the document. So in this case, I get 5 hits. Okay. The results of that are stored in that result section. And so if in scripting, I look at app.doc results, I will have that result available in that area. If I look at checks number 0, which would be the first check that is executed, I get the results for that check. Now, I only have one check, so I'm looking at the results of, is the page empty in my case? Hits tells me the list of all the hits, so that would be 2 hits in the first document I showed and 5 hits in the second document. And then length tells me how many there are. And what I do in this case is I run over them and I create my own list of empty pages. So when I run through this empty pages array will contain the page number for each page that is empty. Yes? If you don't follow or you have questions, don't hesitate, just speak up, okay? Is it possible to see the results of app.doc results? In a way, yes. I think you will need to run the profile or the process plan once so that pdfToolbox has some results. And then where I return true here, so if I do show evaluation results, now it will tell me that it doesn't know what this is, yeah, because I don't have any results and I start using stuff, so it's going to give me an issue. But normally, if you run it once, it should actually allow you to see what the results are afterwards. And where I now say true, if you would make sure that the result of the script is the app.doc result area, then it will show you what you have in there. Okay, so let me close this for a second again. There we go.
Hallo Roland, du kannst es gerne aufmachen, kannst auch gerne reinhören oder es dir überspielen oder sonst wie. Also ich lade dich natürlich ein, dass du es dir anhörst und also es kannst du anhören. Eben, es dreht sich ja darum, um die Thematik. Am Anfang war das Wort sinngemäß und alles ist Schwingung und Frequenz. Und kannst mir auch gerne Bescheid sagen, wenn du Lust hast, wie es dir gefallen hat, wenn du es anhörst.
I don't know who's talking, but you're talking in the cafe. So when I've done this, and when I have empty pages in my document, this empty pages thing will contain a list of empty pages. And now the challenge, of course, was that I only want to look at the pages that are so I only want to look at what I have at the end of the document. So I want to see, I want to make sure that I only remove pages when I have empty pages at the end of the document, right? And I'm using two variables in my case. You can do it a little bit simpler. Like I said, this was part of a bigger thing. And I think this is a little bit safer because I saw some problems with some of the other solutions. I use a switch, so need to remove pages is originally set to false, and I will set that to true if I actually want to remove anything. And then I am using a variable that is last page to keep. Yeah? And that originally is set to 0. Now, this thing here calculates what needs to be done. And basically it will start at the last page of the document. And when it finds that page in my empty pages array, it will say, okay, this page is empty. I have to go to the previous one. And it will keep doing that until it finds a page that has content on it, and then it stops. So when we get here, this app vars last page to keep is going to be filled in with the last page in the document that has content on it. That's the whole trick. And then I want to build in some safety. It could be that last page to keep is 0. My whole document could be empty. If you try to remove all pages from a PDF document, bad things happen. PDF document always needs to have at least one page, or it's not a valid document anymore. So if all pages in the document are empty, there is not that much that you can do. I could keep one empty page, but in this case, I've chosen to, in that case, do nothing. And the other thing is, if there are no empty pages to be removed at the end of the document, then I am not enabling my fix either. Yeah? So the end of this whole script will be either true or false that says, do I need to do something or not? And last page to keep will be set to the last filled page in the document. And that's the last page I want to keep. All other pages have to be removed. Okay? But I'm not doing anything to the document here. All I'm doing is I'm setting these two variables. And I'm putting both of them in app.vars. What we saw last time is that this app.vars section is the one that is saved throughout a profile or a process plan. So I store both of these in here because I want to use them further down my process plan. And then, of course, the real thing happens here in remove extra pages. Now, first of all, this thing is controlled by a variable. Yeah, that's the first thing. And that is that variable, that is the switch. The second thing is that the fixup itself also uses a variable. So I'm using remove pages in this case. And which pages are removed is determined by detect empty pages that need to be removed, which is a check. And that check uses this last page to keep variable. Yeah. So if my script determines that page 10 is the last page to keep, then this variable will be 10. The page will be detected that, or the check here will say, give me a hit if the page number is greater than 10. And then remove pages will remove that page. Make sense? And all of that put together means that if we run this, so in the first example, the document that has no empty pages at the end, it says detect empty pages, and it finds 2 pages in the middle of the document. And then I run my script, but there is no fix-up that is run because my script has determined that there is no need to remove anything, so the fix-up is never done. If I run this on the second document that has 3 empty pages at the end, what you can see is that it goes through the same thing. So now it finds 5 pages that are empty. And then I run my script. And then we have this need to remove pages and last page to keep. Yeah? So in this case, my script determined that the fix-up does need to run. And it says the last page that should be kept is number 10. Yeah? And that means if I look at the result, number 10 is the last page. If I look at the original document, the other 3 pages after page 10 were in fact empty. Yeah? So what it does is remove the last 3 pages from the document, which is completely correct. Does that make sense? Any questions? No? Yeah, and you can use the same technique for more complex things, of course. And I have not run this one now on this test document, but we'll see what happens. So if I run this one, this is a slightly more complex example. And it says the number of pages in the document should be a multiple of, let's say that it should be a multiple of 8. Yeah. And when I run this, we'll see what it will do. So in this case, it actually added pages. I now have 16 pages in the document. Yeah. So it looked at what I had and it added empty pages until the complete document was 16, because 16 is a multiple of 8. If I run this again and I say, give me a multiple of 10, my document is 13 pages. Yeah, so you would kind of, actually this document is 10 pages, so it's not going to do anything probably. We'll see with the other one. So when I run this, I want a multiple of 10. It actually does nothing. The document is already 10 pages. If I now run it with the document that is 13 pages, and remember the 3 last were empty, and I say I want a multiple of 10, what it has done is it has not added additional pages to make it 20 pages, but it has removed the empty pages so that it goes back to 10. Yeah? And that was exactly the purpose of this more complex example or process plan, is that if a document already has empty pages at the end and you want to create a multiple, it calculates whether it wants to or it has to remove pages or add pages in order to get to the multiple. But of course, you only want to remove empty pages. You don't want to remove pages with any content. Okay, and it is a little bit more complex, but the principle is exactly the same. I have a variable that asks me what multiple I want. There is a preflight check to find the empty pages in the document. There is a little script that is a little bit more complex because I have to calculate how many pages to add and how many pages to remove. But the principle is still the same. I'm just storing some stuff in variables, app.vars. And then I have a missing page fix-up that will do exactly what it says. So it will add pages if I determine in my script that pages need to be added. And I have a remove extra pages if my script determines that it needs to remove pages and not add pages. And these two are controlled I'll show you the add missing one. These two are controlled from within the script. So this amount of pages to add is something that was calculated by the script. Yeah. So the theory here is exactly the same. Yes? I can try, Cedric. I'm not sure I'm not sure actually I've ever done this before. So let me see whether we can, and we probably can't do this in the test environment. So the question was, can you show how we can see these results here? I have now run something. It hasn't done any fixes, but that should be fine. So now let's see whether this would actually work or not. Yeah, probably not. I'll have to.
That is what I just wanted to answer. If there is something, it's always the result of the very last thing that happened. It might not.
Yeah, it's going to be the result of this one, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So what we could do is we could fake it by actually. So if we put this in here again, and we say detect empty pages again, and I just put that in the middle here.
I think you could even run detect empty pages as a separate check.
Yeah, that's probably even easier.
You can disable the steps.
And will it run in the test mode? Well, we'll see. So if I run this, and when you do it now, oh, come on, select it, yes. Yeah, that hasn't done it.
Try to disable the step for removing extra pages.
Yeah, but then I should get rid of this one again as well, probably. So let me get rid of this. And
I have to admit, I postponed working with that editor. I always do log profile execution, and then I go in the scripts and see the results. And
yeah, that's usually better. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
So if the problem is I can't disable it, but then I'm kind of ruining my thing again because there is a variable assigned to this. So probably the easiest way, Cedric, or the better way to do it is if you enable log process execution, then it will give you a JSON file with all the variables. And that is a much better way of, because also then you have it as a text file that you can have open next to the script that you're writing, and you can preserve it.
Okay, the JSON file is variables JSON?
You have a number of JSON files that are produced in the different steps, and usually you have one that is variables.json that has all kinds of stuff in it. But in each step, you should also have a JSON file if there are variables in that particular step.
Okay. I have to test.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so let's look at something else here. And so, like I said, the theory is very simple. Well, it's simple enough. And it is always the same. So you run a pre-flight check, and then you have this doc results section where you find the results of that. And then you can do with that what you want. And in fact, that's true. I wanted to show one other example here, because what I'm using here is the page number of the hits. But as of pdfToolbox 11, I think you can go a little bit further. So if you look at this document, this has a bunch of images on it. And I have a process plan here. And I'm just going to run test so we see what happens. This is going to take a few seconds because it uses place content. Yeah, so this is a very similar approach. There is a preflight check that detects the image resolution of images. And that image resolution is, of course, part of the information that you have when you run preflight. And it uses the information, the check information, to place something on top of the image that was checked. Yeah, because in that doc results section, you not only have the fact that a check ran and the page on which it found something, but you also have the coordinates of the object that you found. So you can know where on the page that object is. And that is what was done here. There is a place content script which looks not only at on which page did we find this, this image. It also looked at the hit information. So in this case, the resolution that was found. And it places that resolution on top of the image itself using the geometry that is stored in that doc.results. Yeah. There is documentation for that as well, but you have to find it. So if we go to help.calasoftware, normally all of the documentation for the JavaScript is in chapter 12, variables in JavaScript. So there is a bunch of stuff in there, but some of the newer things are only at the moment in pdfToolbox 11. So if you go there, you'll see that there is a small section called JavaScript Enhancements. And the one I'm talking about is this one, using object coordinates from a hit in a process plan. And this will explain what it means. It also has the example file and the example process plan that I just showed here as well. And as it explains here, what got added is the most useful part is the coordinates, the lower left X and Y and the upper right X and Y of the object that was hit. So you do a preflight check, the preflight check hits on some objects, and this will give you the lower left corner and the upper right corner of the object that was found. And you could use that to do something with that. Yes? Okay. And the technique is the same. Like I said, you have detect images. In this case, most of the intelligence is actually here in place image marks, because this is a place content template. So there is an HTML template that does all the heavy work. But we have to get the information there. And you'll see that there is, if you download this example, there is a very short script. The only thing it does is it takes app.doc results, check 0 hits. So just the hits information for the check that we do, and it stores it in app vars image hits. Why does it do that? Well, because this app vars thing, like I said, will survive to the next step, and it is actually passed on to the place content template. So because I want to use the information from this preflight check in my place content template, that is passed on by the script. That's the only function that particular script has. And then all the logic of placing the information and so on is done by place content itself. Yeah, so that's another, another possibility there. But like I said, for this to work, you will need to have pdfToolbox 11. It's not going to work with anything before because we didn't save the coordinates in the app.doc results section in pdfToolbox 9 and 10.
David?
Yes.
Do you think that the possibility to see results of the check in the JavaScript session is possible to in the future of Calas?
Why don't you make a feature request, City?
Yeah.
You know what my answer is to those things.
I will. I have to, because it's quite complicated to work with app.result result without this kind of features.
Yeah, what I normally do is I make the preflight check that I want to use, and then, like Peter Kleinheider said, I run it once with the logging with where is it, log profile execution, and that gives you a JSON file, and then I switch it off again and I keep the JSON file open while I'm writing the rest of the code.
So you have to work on the code, but you can't test it. It's a little bit tricky.
Yeah, it's a little bit annoying, I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I have to
it's the same with app.vars to some extent, but luckily in app.vars, there you can see the variables much easier than that. But for the results, it's a little bit difficult, yeah. And I'm thinking there was something I just did for, but I'm not sure I'm going to find it. But there was something in this, yes. So this is not in the process plan, but just to, let me just delete that for now. But this was an example, a question I got from in support, and the question was, can we, same thing, can we see what the result is and how can we work with that? If you're doing a web call, so there is a link here, and I get a response by calling app.http.get, and then I parse it into a JSON object. You could say the same question. I mean, it's hard to work with this because you don't know what the response is going to be and what the result is going to be. But in this case, it's a little bit easier because I can actually just make that the result of my script. Yeah. So this object that is returned by the call is now the result of my script, and that means if you say show evaluation results, you can actually see it right there, what the different things are, and that allows you to work with it a little bit more easily. So in many cases, you can use the results section here to do exactly what you want. In some cases, it is not that easy. And actually, what we should see is if it's not a matter of context as well, because usually you have a process plan context here as well. So I wonder, but I'm not sure. Like I said, I typically don't use that, but what I wonder is if we do this, but we probably still need to, I might have to see if I can come up with something afterwards, but let's just try this before we look at the rest. So do this again. Now say tests, and I have this at the end. And yeah, I have no contexts here that I can switch. So the question is why I can't switch it to the process plan context now, because that might give me access to yeah, I think I'll have a conversation with someone at Calas about this, because I still wonder if there is no way to do that, but I'll try to figure it out. Okay, let's look at the the contestants who gave me something. I got two. One from Jan and one from Cedric. Very different approaches. So I will start with yours, Cedric, because you actually avoided scripting altogether.
Yep.
Which
I made it in 5 minutes.
Yes, but
So
I'll show you the downside as well. So this is I always tell people that you can make loops in process plans, and then it's difficult to come up with a good example. This is one. I'll show you the downside in a second as well, as I said. So the idea here is very simple. There is no scripting involved. There is just a check that says, is the last page empty or not? Yeah. If the last page is empty, it goes to the fix, which removes the last page of the document. And then it asks again, is the last page empty? And if it says yes again, then so it keeps looping basically until all the pages are gone. Now, what I don't know, and I haven't tested it, I don't know what's going to happen if you have a document that is completely empty. That might end catastrophically. But other than that, the theory is very nice, of course. There is just a little loop, and it will loop until it has removed all pages. Now, let me show you the downside of this approach.
I find it's quite long.
Yeah, so this one doesn't have empty pages, so nothing happens. This one has 3 empty pages at the end. I'll have some tea. Yeah, so the downside, of course, is that it does loop. And in my experience, looping in pdfToolbox profiles, there are other reasons why sometimes you have to do it for getting specific effects. But it is almost always a bad idea because of performance. Yeah, it ends up taking very long.
The second reason, it's because I use a check with not with the empty pages, but the check if there is some.
You're doing ink coverage, yes?
Yeah, ink coverage. Yeah. So it's long.
So the check you're using is pages last page, and then also effective ink coverage, which is a much safer check than the one I am using. And actually, in the process plan that that we used in this project, we had to change to this check because it is much better. And you can confine it to the trim box, for example, as well. Yeah. But so the downside is that it has it takes longer. It loops and it takes longer. The other downside, of course, is that it would be more difficult to extend if you wanted to use this technique to also do something like what I did with a number of pages to be added or removed depending on what you have at the end of the document. Then that becomes much more difficult as well. You could still do it in this case by then having a fix-up that adds to a multiple after you've done all this stuff, but then you're removing pages that you're adding back again afterwards, and so that becomes a little bit tricky. But other than that, this is a very nice approach. No scripting whatsoever. You just have to have a little time when you run it. And then and it does work. I also tried it with your. I think the Star Wars document was yours. I also tried it with that one, so it works quite nicely. The other approach comes much closer to what I have done, I think, to the approach that we've just seen. And that is, in this case, there is a check that is a little bit less safe. Object is inside trim box. I think there are 2 problems with that, Jan. The first one is, even though the object might be inside the trim box, it might be white, for example, and not have any markings, or it might just be space. And in that case, your check is going to say there is something there, while that is debatable whether something is there or not. I'm also not entirely sure what's going to happen if an object is partly inside and partly outside the trim box. I haven't tested that, but
yeah, that could be a problem.
yeah, that could be problematic. Huh? But what is the reason I wanted to at least bring this up is because the definition of page is empty is customer dependent, and it is something you have to be careful for. This process plan I showed before with the adding and removing of pages, we actually had to modify it because the what the customer thought was an empty page was not the same as what we thought was an empty page. So it is dependent on what type of file you're working with in a project. So that is the pre-flight check, and then the script is very similar, but a lot simpler in this case. So it looks at results, checks, page numbers, which is something I don't do. I look at the hits, but you actually look at the page numbers where things happen. And then it also creates a last page that is saved in app.vars.
Last page with content, does mean?
Last page with content, yes. And then there is a fix remove pages, and that fix uses a pre-flight check that uses that variable. Yeah. So this works in a very similar way. I'm actually not sure whether I tried it on my document, because I might have some objects there that. So this is the one that didn't have empty pages, and that works. But the difference is, and you can see that here, is that your fix runs regardless. Luckily, pdfToolbox is smart enough to not remove anything if you give it pages that are beyond the document. But the fact that it does run is a little bit, is on the edge. And when I run it with this one, actually also works. Yeah. So the technique certainly works. Like I said, there are two things that that for me are something to look at. The first one is that the fix runs even if it doesn't have to remove anything, and it's safer to use a switch variable for that as well. And the other problem you might have, although I have not tried, what happens is if same as with Cedric, if you remove all pages, so you have a completely empty document, that might be interesting. So yeah. I have not tried that. But actually, it would not be too difficult to try that. So if we just take this document and we remove all the other pages there.
I don't think it is a good idea.
You can't just do good ideas. That's not. So if I say copy, yes, that's fine. Yes. I hope it's still empty because I'm using preview here. And I probably ruined my other document as well, but that was a copy, so that's not a problem. So this one should now be completely empty. Looks that way. Anybody wants to bet what's going to happen? Yeah, so you managed to crash the Adobe PDF library that is underneath. So that was what I expected. Now let's see what this fantastic looping profile plan does with that. I think it's going to just crash a little slower, but we'll see. There we go. Well, you both have the same result, which is very consistent, at least. Let's see whether I did, whether I do any better than that. Yeah. So as I said, I actually have some error handling for that, and I refuse to do anything if the document is completely empty. So yeah. Whether that's
to say one page.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Whether you think this is correct error handling or not is another debate. But at least I had error handling. I didn't crash it.
Yeah, that's a positive.
That's a positive. But so that establishes that removing all pages from a document is not a good idea, and you should not try that. And here it's not a big issue. Actually, I think if we would do this in Switch in an automated workflow, it could be a little bit of a bigger problem. I'm not sure what's going to happen in that case. I hope the file would just be moved to the error output, and that's it. It does cause an exception. Okay, any questions on this? Because this is what I wanted to cover in this cafe. I hope the theory is a little bit clear. This example with the images, you can download that from the help site, as I showed. If anyone wants this remove empty pages one from here, then just let me know and I'll send it to you. Send me a short email and I'll send it to you. Questions? Anyone?
HTTP request?
Yes.
I see something.
You haven't seen that? That was added in PDF tool, was it 11? Or I think it was in 11, but I'm not sure. There should be documentation for that one, although I'm not sure of that either, actually.
I don't think so.
That's possible. I will have to tell Callas in that case. So what you can do is you can look at this insert JavaScript objects.
Yeah.
And then you will have it here. Yeah, so you can do HTTP and then a get. And then there is some timeout, but this I will really need to ask Callas because I don't know. It is based on some Node.js functionality, I think. So there are more options that you can use.
Okay.
But I don't recall which one it is.
Okay.
I think if you go on YouTube and you look at the sessions from the last VIP event in Riga, there is one session where I think Ulrich shows this HTTP, and there he explains what the technology is that is being used and what some of the options are. Yeah. What is important is that it is only the get one. You cannot use post, for example. So in order to, well, it's a security issue. It was restricted to getting information from a server.
Okay.
Yeah, it works quite well. So if you want to get stuff from a database,
okay, I will test.
Absolutely possible. But I think I think the other stuff is also explained in this video. So have a look at those videos on our YouTube channel.
Okay,
they should be there.
Thanks.
Other questions? Good. Then I think we are done. Thank you very much to all of you.